Hello, my name is Buki Fatona. I am a doctoral researcher at the University of Oxford. Welcome to Phil-Sci-Theo, an 8-part discussion series on topics in the intersect of philosophy of science and religion.
The final question is, you are well known for your discovery, Dunbar's number. What is Dunbar's number, and how or does it apply to religion?
So Dunbar's number is essentially the limit on the number of relationships you can have at any one time. Or let me rephrase that and say meaningful relationships you can have at any one time, where you both know where that person stands in your life and they know where you stand in theirs. And you, as a result of that, that's a consequence of having a history with them. And B, it creates a sense of obligation and commitment that if you are within my 150, which of course you are, if you sort of turned up and said, could you do me a favor? I unhesitatingly naturally say yes, and what can I do? Whereas if you're a complete stranger and you turned up out of the blue and knocked on my door, my response is going to be, well, actually, there's not a bad YWCA down the road if you're really stuck. So relationships outside that 150 become much more transactional. So yes, I will help you out, but you have to either pay me or you have to promise to pay me back on a future occasion. Whereas within that 150 community, there is a sense of obligation, right? And that obligation is a consequence of past experiences. We have known each other for a certain length of time. That creates this sense of being a member of a community, and being a member of a community, I owe you obligations of that kind. So that number seems to be extremely robust. We have it in many different data sets, some extremely large. I think the largest is 61 million people.
Gosh.
On Facebook. And the average number of friends listed was 149. It doesn't get any closer.
Yes.
It's extraordinary. But we have it in various different formats, in various different environments, in various different, measured in various different ways. We will keep getting them. It varies. I mean, it's a consequence of the size of our brain and our processing capacities. And so there is some variation among individuals. Probably varies between about 100 and about 250 people on the outer limits, as it were. It depends on your personality as well. Introverts tend to have smaller social circles. Extroverts tend to have more. That's because introverts like to have certain relationships. That's they want the relationship to work. So they'd rather invest a lot of time in a few and be confident that if they ever need to ask a favor, the answer will be yes. Whereas extroverts tend to take the view that it's better to have more, even if that means I have to spread my energies more thinly among you, and I don't mind being rejected.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Because I can go to somebody else, and I've always got somebody else as backup. So there are those kind of variabilities occur, but the number itself, about 150, which is what's known now as Dunbar's number, is extremely robust, and we pick it up all over the place. Now, it turns out to be something very close to the ideal size of church congregations.
Okay. Yes.
And if you want to increase, so what seems to happen in the church congregation literature, it's not my research, it's coming from people within different denominations who've been interested in how you grow churches and the church growth movement, that if you have fewer than about 150 people in the congregation, it puts a lot of burden on everybody, and tends to, as a result, somewhat to cause dropout. If you have too many people above 150, it starts to get a feeling of being less personalized. So people start dropping out because they feel they're being left on the periphery of the central core. Whereas if 100, somewhere around about 150, it probably, the range of possibilities somewhere between 100 and 200, let's say, is this sort of neutral, comfy zone where the size of a congregation seems to work especially well. There are ways to solve that, clearly, and clearly many different churches have done it. One is you can have a very exciting religious services, and then because you got this deep pharmacological, physiological uplift component that's created by very exciting singing and dancing and hymn singing, all the rest of it, or mystical events, you can certainly manage a bigger congregation. One thinks of televangelists in this context a little bit. But alternatively, you can subdivide your church. And I remember being at a conference in the Vatican, or one of the two Vatican universities, some years ago now. So they put in, it was one of the Darwin centennials, so they decided they were going to have theology and Darwinism, or why has theology ignored Darwinism was the actual title of the conference so long. And I gave my talk about the optimal number of community size being 150. When I sat down, there was a bunch of young men in black suits and dog collars sitting behind me, who turned out to be all the parish priests. So these were Jesuits of a particular parish in central England. And they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's very interesting, because we have a parish of 500 people, and we have 3 separate masses on Sunday taken by 3 different priests, and they never mix, but each one works, as a little community." So that's the alternative, is you can have a much bigger congregation, but you have to partition it in different ways to produce the same effect. So there seems to be something about the size of communities of about 150, which are in some sense cognitively optimal for us and work better. And that you can have bigger ones, but you have to manage how you organize the structure of those. And of course, if you think about most of the big religions, certainly in the Christian tradition, this is done by having your little parish with a parish priest, maybe, or 2 or 3, and they're gathered together in, I don't know, deaneries, and those are gathered together in bishoprics, and they in turn are gathered together in archbishoprics to kind of maintain this kind of structure, in order that both you can maintain overview and theological discipline, I suppose. So this kind of hierarchical structure is very good at maintaining coherence a little bit. I mean, the great problem I think that all religions face is, and I should add one other key piece of information, and that is this value of 150 seems to be, not only is it a natural cognitive number for us in terms of the people we know and have meaningful relationships with, as in sort of indicated by the people we would do a favor for without being too demanding in return. Just say yes, no problem, I'll come and help you out. This turns out to be the kind of standard average size of small-scale society communities. So this is sometimes the clan or regional community or something like. It's not the living group, which is a camp group in hunter-gatherer societies, but several camp groups make up a clan or a community, and that's the size of that group is 150, and people from the different camp groups will circulate round the other camp groups within that, but not go quite as often or quite as easily and to live with the people in the next door camp, even though they're the same tribe, as it were. It's like a natural community size, and it turns up all over the place in the historical literature. So the average size of villages in England and Wales, when the Normans did their Doomsday Book census, turns out to be almost exactly 150, as the historians have estimated it. So it's a kind of natural small-scale society community group. And it also seems to be the limit on the number of people we can maintain meaningful relationships with. Grouping is what we're designed to sort of keep together, because that provides us with our support and our support network, essentially, for successful survival and reproduction. But because if you look at all, even small scales, hunter-gatherer type societies, these 150 communities are not the beginning and the end of their social worlds. These communities are built together into higher and higher groupings in multiples, essentially, of 150. So the typical size of tribes in hunter-gatherer societies is 1,500 people. So it's essentially 10 communities. And these numbers appear to be extremely stable. They just work somehow very well in terms of personal relationships. So my sense is that this is why congregation sizes that are about 150 in size somehow work better dynamically within and amongst themselves, as it were, as a group. And that if it's too small or too much larger, there are stresses, because either too much work is having to be done when you share out the costs of keeping the parish going, or conversely, if it's too big, people start being left out because the congregation is taken over by a small clique somewhere at the center who want to do it their way. So these structures are very, very ancient and go back certainly to the appearance of our species 250, 300,000 years ago. They're totally dependent on your brain size. But what is interesting is this fact that then it translates into how we organize our church life. And I suspect that's probably true. I don't have the impression, we don't have such good data. There's been a lot of both studies and data from the church planting movements that reinforce this and offer some very nice kind of independent evidence and explanations for why these numbers should hold together. We don't have that kind of information or data from other religions, but casting one's eye about, by and large, synagogues of 150 seem to be sort of not untypical. Mosques of that kind, probably again about that size. This is not to say that in big cities you can't have cathedrals with very large congregations, or conversely, mosques or synagogues or temples or what have you, Sikh temples, gurdwaras, in particularly populous places which have very large congregations, but looks very much as though when that happens, they survive because they are substructured, and you get this phenomenon of separate Sunday masses, or the equivalent. Right? You've got the evensong attenders and the early morning attenders and the mid-morning attenders at a cathedral, let's say. It's different things, rather than sort of the entire collection of parishes all appearing at the same time in somewhere like a cathedral.
Yes.
So the fact that it's you have a very big cathedral space-wise, physically, doesn't necessarily mean that every day of the week or every Sunday, it has its constituent congregation that turns up and fills it to the brim. That happens on special occasions. The rest of the time, it's just the little local community of maybe just a couple of hundred people that provide the core to them. So these numbers seem to be very important in regulating our lives, and it goes back to our very deep evolutionary past.